At 11:23 a.m. on a Friday in October, a sitting judge was escorted out of his own courtroom. The person who put him there was a 28-year-old schoolteacher in a burgundy sweater. No lawyer, no title, $63 worth of receipts. But to understand how that happened, you have to go back 3 weeks, to a Wednesday morning in early October, a worn-out paperback, and a 16-year-old boy who asked a question nobody in that classroom was ready for. Her name was Lila Montgomery, literature teacher, Lane Tech, North Side Chicago. She believed, the way you believe in the smell of wet pavement after summer rain, that doing the right thing quietly was enough. Stand up at a town hall. Say your piece into a microphone. Go home to your cold pasta and your cat named Atticus and your small apartment off North Ridgeway. And the world would simply let you be. She was wrong about that. But the first sign hadn't come after the town hall. It had come before it, 3 weeks earlier, a Tuesday evening in mid-September. She had paid a traffic fine online, $63. Transaction, ID, clean as a new page. Filed it away without thinking twice. 2 days later, a form letter arrived from the court. Standard language. A case number she didn't recognize. She almost threw it out. Instead, she set it on the corner of her kitchen table. Something about the number nagged at her, the way a word does when you can't remember if you've spelled it right. She cross-referenced it against her payment receipt. They didn't match. She told herself it was a clerical error. Systems made mistakes. She drafted a short email to the Cook County Clerk's office and forgot about it for a week. Then came the town hall. Chicago in October bites differently than January. January you can prepare for. October sneaks under your coat before you've had a chance to button it. Lila walked to Lane Tech that Wednesday morning with her canvas tote bag and a travel mug of coffee. She'd already spilled the first cup on the recipe card taped to her fridge, her grandmother's apple cake. The ink had gone faded blue over the years. She blotted it with a dish towel, and it smeared. She left it that way. Under her arm, a worn paperback, To Kill a Mockingbird. The spine cracked from years of use. She had a newer copy at home, unread. This was the one that mattered. The old burgundy sweater, she almost always wore it. Room 214, 3rd floor. Radiator clicking in the corner the way it always did. She uncapped a marker and wrote 3 words on the whiteboard. Symbolism of justice. Chapter 21, she said. Atticus did everything right, told the truth, laid out the evidence. So why does Tom Robinson still lose? The room was quiet, the way rooms get when a question actually lands. Then a hand. Jaden Washington, 16, long arms, quiet energy. Gray hoodie he wore nearly every day. Eyes that were always slightly too serious for someone his age, like he'd been keeping accounts for a long time. His hand was trembling. Miss Montgomery? He swallowed. If I lose my scholarship, I'll have to drop out and help my mom. She's sick. A pause. Is justice in books actually real? The radiator clicked. Nobody moved. She set the marker down. Justice doesn't just appear, she said. Somebody has to stand up for it. Even when they're just an ordinary person. She believed every word. She just didn't know yet what it would cost her to prove it. That evening, she stood in front of 200 people on the West Side and said, plainly, without a tremor, that Judge Harlan Whitaker's rulings had cost underprivileged kids their futures. She drove home, fed Atticus, went to bed. 48 hours later, a voicemail arrived, 9:14 on a Friday night. Miss Montgomery, Judge Harlan Whitaker presiding, Chicago Municipal Court. You have failed to respond to your traffic citation from September 14th. This constitutes contempt of court. A hearing has been scheduled. She pulled up her email. Payment confirmation. September 18th. $63. Transaction ID clean as a new page. She pulled up the nagging form letter she'd set aside 3 weeks ago, then the new court document attached to the voicemail. 2 different case numbers, 2 different signature fonts, the same citation date. It wasn't a clerical error. The summons had been altered, manually, and now, 48 hours after the town hall, they were using it. She pressed her fist against the edge of the table. The framed photograph beside her, her grandfather, Robert Montgomery, small-town attorney, 40 years helping families in Cook County who couldn't afford anyone better. He was smiling in the picture, that particular smile of his, like he was in on something you hadn't figured out yet. He had died 3 years ago, ground down by a legal battle the system had never intended him to survive. That loss had driven Lila out of law school, 1 semester before the bar exam. She had chosen a smaller life, safer, and she had called it wisdom because calling it fear was harder. She was not proud of that. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "I just wanted to teach. Why is this happening?" This time, she thought, I will not stay silent. What she didn't know yet was that the judge had already set a second trap. It would be waiting for her at school the very next morning. The clock in Principal Marcus Hale's office read 7:52 a.m. 2 weeks before the hearing. Marcus was a broad man with a kind face, working very hard right now to look neutral, not succeeding. He had the look of someone handed a collection plate at a church he was no longer sure he believed in. "Lila." He cleared his throat. "The superintendent got a call from the judge's office. Your contract review's been put on hold." Another pause. He mentioned that a brief public statement might resolve things, that your remarks at the town hall were perhaps misinterpreted. "Marcus," her voice stayed even. "You know what I said wasn't misinterpreted." He looked at his desk. A pencil rolled off the edge and hit the floor. Neither of them moved to pick it up. "I know," he said, barely above a whisper. She picked up her bag. "I'll see you tomorrow." That afternoon, she pulled a cardboard box down from the top shelf of her closet. Dusty. Sealed since her grandfather's funeral. Inside, his legal files, case notes, highlighted statutes, old letters from clients he'd helped for free, some typed, some handwritten on ruled paper, the smell of aged folders, and a trace of his aftershave still clinging to the cardboard, the way certain things refuse to leave a room even after the person is gone. She settled on the kitchen floor, Atticus threading figure eights around her ankles, indifferent to the weight of it all. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. The voice was a man's, slightly out of breath. The kind of breathless that comes from talking somewhere you shouldn't be. "Miss Montgomery, I work at the courthouse. I can't give you my name." The judge doesn't respond well to public criticism. I've seen him do this before. Be very careful in that courtroom. The line went dead. He'd done this before. That detail lodged somewhere in her chest like a splinter. The fear came in behind it, cold and fast. She was back in her last semester of law school. The morning she had slid her bar exam study guide back onto the shelf and walked out. Running away isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like choosing a smaller life and calling it wisdom. She almost put the phone down for good. Then it buzzed again. A text from Jaden. No words, just a photograph. His mother in a hospital bed at Rush University Medical Center, holding his hand across the bed rail. No caption, no explanation. He didn't need one. She looked at that photograph for a long time. Then she stood up and went back to the box. She spent the better part of a week with her grandfather's files, reading every case, every annotated statute, every handwritten margin note in his particular cramped script. Not looking for answers yet, just relearning a language she had walked away from 3 years ago. On the Thursday of that week, an envelope arrived in her school mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single printed page, a list of 7 names: teachers, a social worker, a school librarian. Dates beside each name. No explanation. She recognized the pattern before she'd finished the page. She spent the weekend at the Harold Washington Library on South State Street, cross-referencing court records. 4 of the 7 names appeared in the public docket. Each had received some form of legal notice within 72 hours of speaking publicly about Judge Whitaker's rulings. The envelope had no signature, but the library's public computer terminal log, which she had no way to access, would have shown the session was opened using a guest pass purchased with cash. Whoever sent it had been careful. The following Monday, an anonymous tip, traced later to the judge's office, reached a parent group through the school board rumor network, claiming Lila had ethical concerns and possible activist ties. By noon, 3 parents had emailed Principal Hale. She found out from Marcus at the end of the day. "They're trying to make noise," she said. "They're doing more than that," Marcus said. He looked at her carefully. "Lila, whatever you're planning, be sure." She was sure. She just wasn't finished yet. The following week, a Tuesday afternoon, she was eating lunch alone in room 214, the 7 names spread across the desk beside a copy of Illinois Supreme Court procedural guidelines, when a colleague knocked on the door. James Okafor, history teacher, 3rd floor, quiet man who coached the debate team. "I heard what happened to you," he said, "and I looked into it a little." He set a small piece of paper on her desk. "I found something about the West Side Children's Education Fund, the public 990 filings. The numbers for administrative expenses went up considerably starting in 2021. More than what's typical for an organization that size." He shrugged. "Might be nothing. Might be worth knowing. Why are you telling me this?" He picked up his lunch bag. "Because your grandfather helped my uncle keep his house in 2007. My uncle mentioned it once, years ago. I never forgot." He paused at the door. "I'm not in a position to do more than this, but I wanted you to know." He left. She looked at the piece of paper for a long time, then she filed it, and kept going. It was another 3 days before she got to the Harold Washington Library on South State Street with her complete notes. She had a table near the reference stacks. A pile of 990 filings. Her grandfather's annotated copy of the Illinois Judicial Conduct Rules. She almost didn't notice the man. He was 2 tables over, reading a financial report. Dark jacket, gray trousers, early 30s. The kind of calm that doesn't need to announce itself. He had been there the last time she'd come in too. She'd registered him without quite noting it. He came over. "Theo Langston. Lila Montgomery." "I know." He folded his hands on the table. "Your grandfather helped my family 15 years ago. A debt dispute could have cost us everything. He won. We were nobody. And he took the case anyway. Never charged us a cent." She didn't speak. "I've been following what's been happening," he said. "With Whitaker, with the fund." He was quiet for a moment. "I've been the largest anonymous donor to the West Side Children's Education Fund since 2019. For 4 years, the numbers I received in annual reports didn't match what I could find in public filings. I've been trying to build a picture on my own, but I'm not a lawyer. And I wasn't going to go to someone I didn't trust. You could go to the press. I could." He met her eyes. "But a story in the Tribune might get him suspended. What you're preparing could actually end it." He let that land. "The financial records I have access to, wire transfers, internal emails, fund meeting minutes, they document where the money went and who authorized it. But I can't hand them to you as a solution. You have to analyze them yourself, understand them completely. Present them in your own words. That's the only way it holds in a proceeding. You've been sitting on this. I've been waiting for the right moment and the right person," he said. Then, more quietly, "I'm not entirely sure I'm doing the right thing by involving you. I've thought about it a great deal." She studied him. "What's your risk in this?" He was quiet for a moment. "If this goes wrong, my name gets connected to a failed attempt to discredit a sitting judge. That has professional consequences." Another pause. "So I need you to be certain before I give you anything." I'm certain. He nodded slowly. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a USB drive. Set it on the table between them. Everything is on there. Emails, wire transfers, meeting minutes, real documents, real names. He stood. But you have to build the case from it yourself. I won't come forward until you have. And even then, he paused. I can't promise what I say on the stand will be enough. I know, she said. Your grandfather knew it better than anyone, he said. That doing this right matters more than the outcome. Yes, she said, it does. She picked up the drive. She spent the next week at her kitchen table. Real evenings, not marathon nights. Coffee going cold. The fluorescent light buzzing faintly above the sink. Atticus asleep on a corner of the files. One paw draped over the edge of a folder marked 2021-Q3. She read every document twice, then a third time. Built a timeline. Cross-referenced names against the 990 filings James had flagged. Against the pattern from the 7 names. Against the court docket record she'd pulled herself. The judge, his son. A group of real estate developers from the Loop. The picture that emerged was methodical and deeply wrong. Scholarship funds meant for West Side children had been quietly redirected for years through a shell company tied to real estate bids under the judge's jurisdiction. The week of the hearing, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror and rehearsed out loud. Her voice shook on the first pass. Less on the second, steadier on the third. Fear is human, she told her reflection. Silence is the real failure. She said it until she believed it. What neither the judge nor anyone watching expected was what Lila had decided to do the moment she walked through those courtroom doors. The Chicago Municipal Court building on West Washington Street is not a warm place. Gray stone, soaring ceilings, a hush that makes ordinary people feel small before they've spoken a word. The marble floors echo. Every person who walks through those doors feels, at least for a moment, like they're already on the wrong side of something. Lila arrived at 8:47 a.m., dark blazer over the burgundy sweater, hair pinned up. A few strands loose from the walk, leather-bound folder under one arm, sealed manila envelope under the other. She'd slept 5 hours. She felt it in her shoulders, heavy as river stones. Some things are larger than tired. The courtroom was more crowded than she'd expected. A reporter from the Tribune near the back, spiral notebook already open, pen behind one ear. Teachers from Lane Tech filling the gallery, parents from the West Side. 4 students in the third row, 2 of them Jaden's closest friends. In the far back corner, in a plain dark jacket, Theo Langston. He did not look up. Judge Harlan Whitaker entered at 9:04 a.m., 55, white-haired, moving with the ease of a man who had never once doubted the room would arrange itself around him. He settled into his chair, adjusted his glasses with one deliberate finger, looked at Lila. He smiled. Not a kind smile. Miss Montgomery, you're here on a straightforward contempt matter. This should take no more than 20 minutes. He let the word straightforward sit in the air, a small, quiet thing with weight under it. Do you have counsel? I'm representing myself, Your Honor. A murmur through the gallery. The smile came back, sharper. I'd strongly advise. Your Honor. Clear, unhurried. I have a preliminary motion to enter before we proceed. Silence. A motion for recusal on grounds of documented judicial bias and falsification of process documentation. Dead silence. A different kind. The kind that falls when something genuinely unexpected has happened in a room full of people who believed they knew how the day would go. Lila walked to the bench and laid the documents down with both hands. Exhibit A is the summons I received, dated 48 hours after the West Side Town Hall in which I publicly named this court. Exhibit B is my confirmed payment receipt for the original citation, dated 4 days prior. Transaction ID 4471-B. Cook County Clerk's Office Portal. The case number on the summons does not match my original ticket. The font in the signature block is inconsistent with current courthouse document software. She looked up. The summons was altered. Your Honor, after the town hall. The Tribune reporter was writing very fast. Whitaker's jaw tightened. Once, like a man who has stepped on something in the dark. Furthermore, this recusal motion is supported by a documented pattern. 6 prior cases over 4 years. Teachers, advocates, a school librarian. Each received anomalous legal notices within 72 hours of publicly criticizing this bench. She set the second stack on the bench, neat, tabbed, every page dated. Procedural due process is not a tool for discouraging public speech, Your Honor. The room held completely still. Whitaker reached for his gavel. This motion is procedurally premature. Illinois Supreme Court Rule 63, C. 1A. She did not raise her voice. Recusal is required where impartiality might reasonably be questioned. The documented timeline meets that standard. She sat down, hands flat on the table. Whitaker leaned forward. His voice came out low, with a cold draft running beneath it. You really think this changes anything, Miss Montgomery? I think the documents answer that more clearly than I can. He straightened, glanced, briefly, involuntarily, at the reporter, at the gallery, at the court reporter's fingers hovering over her keys. The court will recess for 15 minutes. He walked out. The room broke open. 30 people drawing breath at once after holding it too long. Lila sat very still in the middle of it. Her hands, hidden under the table, were trembling. Not from fear, from the specific release that comes when you do something terrifying and do it well. She thought of her grandfather in his small office on West Division Street. Yellow legal pad, terrible coffee, unshakable belief that the truth, laid out completely, was still the most powerful thing in any room. I am not finished yet. Because what she was about to present when that recess ended, buried in the financial record she had spent 2 weeks building into a case, was something far larger and far darker than a falsified summons. Whitaker came back from recess looking like a man who had made a phone call and not gotten the answer he needed. He sat, smoothed his robe, folded his hands. Miss Montgomery, let's proceed. Lila opened her folder. Your Honor, additional exhibits. Documenting a sustained pattern of judicial misconduct and the deliberate misappropriation of designated charitable education funds. The courtroom held its breath. She laid it out calmly. The way a good teacher explains something the room deserves to understand fully. 7 cases, 7 individuals, teachers, a social worker, 2 community advocates, a school librarian, a parent. Each had spoken publicly against rulings from this bench. Each received legal pressure within 72 hours. Code complaints, license flags, summons with dates that didn't align. She had the names, the filing dates, the case numbers. Every one. This is not a pattern of coincidence. This is a pattern of conduct. Then the financial records. The West Side Children's Education Fund has been accepting donations designated for scholarship support in Austin, North Lawndale, and Humboldt Park since 2018. She set the documents on the bench. Internal wire transfer records show that between January 2021 and this past August, approximately $2.3 million in scholarship funds were redirected to a shell company registered in Delaware. She let that number settle. The sole beneficial owner of that shell company is a real estate development group with active bids on 3 West Side parcels. Currently subject to zoning decisions before this court. The Tribune reporter's pen had gone still. She was staring. Whitaker's face hadn't moved, but his left hand, at the edge of the bench, curled inward. Then he smoothed it flat again. Lila looked up. These are not simply documents, Your Honor. Her voice was steady, but warmer now. Sorrowful in the way that comes from understanding exactly what is at stake. A 16-year-old boy named Jaden Washington may be forced to leave school to care for his mother because his scholarship was eliminated through this redirection. The court will require time to review these submissions. Your Honor, she did not sit. I would request that the recusal motion be ruled on before any recess. Illinois Supreme Court precedent holds that a judge with a documented conflict must act on a recusal request before proceeding. The court will recess. A court officer leaned down at her table. The court will require time to review these submissions. Your Honor, she did not sit. I would request that the recusal motion be ruled on before any recess. Illinois Supreme Court precedent holds that a judge with a documented conflict must act on a recusal request before proceeding. The court will recess. A court officer leaned down at her table. The judge would like a private word in chambers. Lila looked up. Is he willing to put that in writing? The officer blinked. Ma'am? Then I'll wait here. 90 seconds later, Whitaker appeared at the side door, robe slightly open at the collar, looking at her across the empty table. Withdraw everything, he said, low, almost conversational. Every exhibit, every motion. I'll make the contract review disappear permanently. You keep your position. Everyone moves on. She thought of her grandfather, offered similar arrangements, in different forms, more times than he ever told her, who always said the same thing. A deal made in the dark is a wound that never heals. No, she said. He studied her face, searching for the negotiating position beneath the word. He didn't find one. You're making a serious mistake. I understand what I'm doing. He went back through the door. When the court reconvened, Lila submitted 3 final exhibits. First, emails between Whitaker and a zoning committee liaison showing preferential scheduling of hearings tied to the development group. Second, financial records tracing a $90,000 private school tuition payment for Whitaker's son through the same Delaware shell company. Third, an internal memo discussing a formal complaint against a Lane Technical College prep employee for alleged contact with an unsanctioned organization. The name was redacted. The employee ID matched hers. He had been building the frame before she'd even filed the motion. The courtroom murmured. And then, from the last row, Theo Langston stood up. Quiet. Steady. But there was something different in his face now. The careful calm of a man who had weighed this moment for a long time and had made his choice. Your Honor, his voice carried without effort. My name is Theodore Langston. I have been the primary anonymous donor to the West Side Children's Education Fund since 2019. Every redirected dollar documented in these exhibits came from my personal contributions, each designated in writing for student scholarships. You have been misrepresenting the use of those funds to me for 4 years. The color left Whitaker's face. He looked at Theo, at Lila, at the gallery, the reporter, the teachers, the parents. Clerk Gerald still staring at the floor. You are nothing, he said to Lila, all pretense gone. You are nothing but an ant. How dare you? The Tribune reporter was already on her phone. 3 seats down from Theo, a man in a plain dark suit, who had been sitting quietly since the proceedings began, a manila folder on his lap, stood and spoke. Your Honor, my name is Richard Alvarez. I'm an investigator with the Illinois Judicial Inquiry Board. This proceeding has been observed on the basis of a confidential complaint submitted several weeks ago. He spoke without drama. In light of today's submissions, the board will be requesting an emergency administrative review of this bench. Counsel for the board will contact you directly. He sat back down. Whitaker did not reach for the gavel. He looked at the room, at every face in it, all of them looking back. What happened in the next several minutes would run on the evening news for a week. But what Lila felt in that moment, standing in a marble courtroom in a burgundy sweater, with her folder still open, was something no camera would ever quite capture. Judge Harlan Whitaker was escorted out of his own courtroom at 11:23 a.m. He walked past the respondent's table without looking at it, without looking at her. The Illinois Judicial Inquiry Board investigator had been present since the proceedings opened, following a confidential complaint submitted 3 weeks earlier. The financial evidence, Theo's testimony, and a state-level investigation already in progress were sufficient to initiate emergency administrative review. Whitaker's bench was suspended pending formal proceedings. A federal referral for the financial misconduct would follow in the weeks after. None of it happened in 4 minutes, but it had all been set in motion. The gavel he had raised to silence an ordinary teacher in a burgundy sweater never came down. The courtroom broke into sound all at once. The Tribune reporter was already at the exit, notebook pressed to her chest. Parents from the West Side had their arms around each other. Lila sat at the respondent's table with her folder closed in front of her. She wasn't crying. She felt something beyond crying. The particular stillness that settles after a long summer storm, when the air has gone clean and everything is exactly where it was, but changed in a way you can feel without naming. Her grandfather used to call it the clearing. She looked toward the window. October light came through in long, pale strips across the marble floor. She thought about a gray morning in law school 3 years ago, when she had quietly, without ceremony, chosen a smaller life. She was glad she hadn't done the same thing this time. 2 weeks later, a gray Thursday in early November, Lila walked into room 214 and found the lights already on. The desks rearranged into a wide semicircle. All 27 students were standing inside it. Jaden was at the front, holding a framed photograph. He was grinning, a real, wide grin that had been waiting behind all that seriousness for a long time. "We found it in the book room," he said, "in that cardboard box you left there in September. We had it restored at the Walgreens photo counter on Milwaukee. Took 3 weeks." She took the photograph. Her grandfather, younger than she'd ever seen him, standing on the steps of the Cook County Courthouse in the late 1970s. Suit slightly too large, old leather briefcase. That smile. She turned it over. On the back, in Jaden's careful print, signed by all 27 students. "You didn't just teach us books. You taught us how to live, and how to stand up for what's right. That was the greatest lesson. And it didn't come from any textbook." Jaden stepped forward and hugged her, one by one. So did everyone else. She laughed, a surprised, slightly undone laugh. The kind that escapes before you can stop it. By the time it was over, her blazer was crooked and she didn't care at all. That same week, the Cook County Superintendent's Office issued a public statement. The fund would be fully restructured under independent community oversight. All redirected funds traced and restored. All suspended scholarships reinstated with a written acknowledgement of error. Jaden's scholarship was restored with a formal apology from the school board. Principal Marcus Hale came to her classroom Friday afternoon, after the students had gone. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his jacket pockets. "I owe you more than an apology," he said, "but I'll start there. You were afraid, Marcus. That's human. Staying quiet when you know better isn't." He swallowed. "I let fear decide for me. I knew it while it was happening." She nodded. It was an honest thing to say. He produced a small sealed envelope. "The superintendent wants to name the fund's new student advisory board after your grandfather. The Robert Montgomery Scholar Leadership Initiative." Lila held the envelope without opening it. "He would have said that was far too much fuss," she said. Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. "That's almost exactly what I told them." On a Saturday in late November, Lila met Theo for coffee near Millennium Park. The wind off Lake Michigan moved through the bare trees and smelled of cold water and winter coming. For a while they talked about ordinary things. The first real cold snap. A stray dog Theo had nearly adopted outside a shelter on Clybourne before thinking better of it. It felt like exhaling after holding your breath for a very long time. "He would be so proud of you," Theo said quietly. She looked down at her cup, a small chip on the handle she hadn't noticed before. "I almost didn't do it," she said. "More than once." "But you did." "Yes." She looked up. "I did." He looked at her across the table with unhurried warmth, the look of a man who has waited a long time for something and is in no hurry now. "Maybe," she said. "We still have a lot more to say to each other." He smiled, slow and real. "I was hoping you'd say that." But the moment that stayed with Lila longest, long after the news faded and the courtroom had emptied, happened alone. On a quiet Tuesday evening, she almost hadn't made it through. The last Tuesday in November fell on the 28th, the evening before Thanksgiving. Most of Lane Tech had gone quiet by 4 o'clock, hallways empty, fluorescent lights clicking off in sequence as the custodial crew made their rounds. The whole building settling into that particular hush schools take on when the students have gone home and left their energy behind. Like warmth in a coat. The only room still lit was room 214. Lila sat at her desk by the window in her burgundy sweater. The restored photograph of her grandfather propped against the pencil cup where she could see it clearly. She had meant to finish grading. She had graded 3 papers. Then she set the red pen down and simply sat. Outside, the sky over North Milwaukee Avenue had turned the deep gray of something held in. The first real snow of the season was coming down, fine and slow, just enough to be beautiful, not enough to stick. The oak tree in the school courtyard had lost every one of its leaves by now. Every last copper and gold leaf she had walked past on a Wednesday morning in October. Carrying her coffee and her spilled-on recipe card and her worn paperback, not yet knowing what was coming. She picked up the photograph. Her grandfather in 1978, briefcase in hand, suit slightly too large. That smile. "I did it, Grandpa," she said softly. Her voice held. That still surprised her a little. "I was afraid every single day of it, and I did it anyway." She paused. "I don't think I'm carrying the regret anymore. I think I let it go somewhere in that courtroom." When I laid everything out on that table and stood behind it, she looked at his face, that particular smile of his. "You always said the truth was the most powerful thing in any room." I didn't understand what that meant until now. I think I do. She set the photograph down with both hands, carefully. Atticus, who had been asleep inside her canvas tote bag under the desk for the better part of 2 hours, chose this moment to stretch dramatically. Extend one front paw onto the floor, reconsider, and retract it. She laughed. Quiet, genuine, completely unburdened. The kind that comes when your guard has finally fully come down. The door opened. Jaden, still in his gray hoodie, slightly out of breath the way you are after running from a bus stop. He was carrying a brown paper bag from the deli on Division Street, and she could smell the soup before he'd crossed the threshold. "My mom said you probably hadn't eaten," he said. Lila blinked. "How does your mother know whether I've eaten?" "She texts Principal Hale sometimes." He set the bag on the corner of her desk with the quiet authority of someone delivering something important. "She wanted me to give you this too." He produced a folded note, handwritten on hospital stationery. The letterhead for the oncology department at Rush University Medical Center still visible across the top. Lila unfolded it. "Dear Miss Montgomery, I have been trying to find the right words since I heard what you did, and I'm not sure I've found them. But Jayden told me you are the kind of person who does the right thing, even when it costs her. He said he knew that the first week of school. I believe my son is going to do something remarkable with his life, and you are a part of why. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Denise Washington." She read it twice. folded it along the same creases, and held it in both hands. Then she looked at Jaden. This 16-year-old from the west side with the gray hoodie and the two serious eyes, who had raised his hand in her classroom on a Wednesday morning in October and asked whether justice in books was actually real. "Tell your mother the soup smells wonderful," Lila said. He grinned. "She figured it was better than whatever you'd been eating." She is almost certainly correct about that. He turned to go, stopped in the doorway, looked back at her, at the photograph on the desk, at the woman in the burgundy sweater who had once been so afraid that she had walked away from everything she was built for. "You're our hero, Miss Montgomery," he said, without any drama at all. She shook her head. "I'm your teacher." "Yeah, that's what I meant." He left. She listened to his footsteps fade down the empty hallway. Outside, the snow was coming down a little thicker now. Still not enough to stick, just enough to make the street below look like something from a snow globe your grandmother kept on the mantelpiece. The one you weren't supposed to touch, but always did anyway. Just to watch the white settle. She opened the soup. Steam rose in a slow curl. She picked up the red pen, looked at the stack of ungraded papers, and decided they would wait until Monday. Some evenings are made for sitting quietly with the people who shaped you, even the ones no longer at the table. Some evenings are for soup going warm in your hands, and a photograph that made it back to you after all, and the deep, unhurried peace of a woman who told the truth when it mattered, and is no longer afraid of what comes next. Lila didn't find her courage in a single dramatic moment. She found it the way most of us find anything worth keeping. Slowly, in the ordinary hours, when no one was watching, on a kitchen floor surrounded by her grandfather's old files, in front of a bathroom mirror at 11 at night, in a photograph she hadn't looked at in 3 years. If you are carrying something heavy right now, a loss, a regret, a silence you've kept too long, here's what Lila's story quietly asks of you. Tonight, before you turn out the light, find one object in your home that belonged to someone you loved. His coffee mug with the chip in the handle, her recipe card in faded blue ink. Set it somewhere you'll see it in the morning. Then write down, in the small notebook beside the takeout menus in the kitchen drawer, one true thing you never said out loud while you still could. Not to perform grief, not to relive it, just to honor it. Because the things we were too afraid to say don't disappear when we stay silent. They wait. And sometimes, on a quiet Tuesday evening with snow coming down outside and soup going warm in your hands, they finally find their way home. You have more power in you than you have ever been given credit for. Not because of anything you achieved, because of everything you survived and carried forward with grace. Real people wrote these scripts with passion and purpose to spark reflection and change. AI was merely a helpful tool that polished the delivery, making sure profound messages about respect, redemption, and human dignity reached as many hearts as possible.